Harper awoke to the soft sound of the wind gently tapping against the bedroom window. The bed beside her was empty, the pillows still pristine, untouched, with no trace that Cole had slept there. She reached out her hand, brushing against the cold space where he used to lie. It had been 2 days since he left, carrying a small suitcase with only a few clothes and a look she couldn't quite interpret. He hadn't said where he was going, and she hadn't had the strength to ask. She sat there on the bed, engulfed by the stillness of the house once filled with laughter, conversations, and dreams of the future. Now, all that was left were the echoes of memories, distant and fading. Harper glanced at the clock on the bedside table, but time felt suspended, frozen in place. Rising slowly, she trudged to the kitchen where the cold coffee maker sat silently, a stark reminder that nothing in the house was as it had once been. As she prepared coffee, her thoughts drifted. She recalled the day she met Cole in that noisy university cafe. He had been shy but persistent, returning day after day just to catch a glimpse of her. She smiled at the memory of their first date, a simple walk in the park where he first held her hand. His palms had been sweaty, but the gesture was genuine, full of promise. They were young, full of dreams, and their love felt unshakable. Their marriage had been the happiest chapter of their lives, at least for a while. Cole's playful and optimistic nature had a way of making Harper laugh even on the hardest days. He was a light, and she was the structure, the anchor that kept him grounded when his ambitious projects seemed to take on lives of their own. For years, it worked. They complemented each other, moved together in harmony. Arguments were rare, and when they did happen, they were just small bumps in the road, never anything that felt like a true fall. But what had once felt light began to grow heavy. At first, it was the usual struggles, overdue bills, broken promises, and neglected chores. Then, the little annoyances began to accumulate. Words began to feel sharper, and nights ended in silence, each of them turning away from the other. Then came the decision to have children. At first, it was a thrilling idea. They dreamed together, discussing nursery colors, names, and imagining what it would be like to see each other in the reflection of a new life. But as the months passed, the tests kept coming back negative. Harper held on to hope, but with each failed attempt, she felt more and more defeated. Cole, always the optimist, insisted that there was no rush, but to Harper, his words rang hollow, as though he didn't fully grasp the weight of the situation. Tests and doctor's visits eventually revealed the truth that Harper had feared. Her body wasn't able to conceive. That was when things truly began to unravel. Cole wanted to talk, to explore alternatives. "We can adopt. We can try treatments," he suggested, holding her hand gently as she turned her gaze away. But Harper couldn't see him without feeling guilty. If she loved him, how could she condemn him to a life without children? How could she deny him the chance to be a father? The distance between them grew quickly. Harper stopped discussing the future, avoiding his touch. At first, Cole tried to stay calm, giving her space, but his patience soon turned into frustration. "You need to talk to me," he urged one night after she had spent hours in silence, staring blankly at the television without really seeing it. "Talk about what, Cole?" she replied bitterly. "Every time you look at me, I can only think of what you're giving up." "I'm not giving up on anything, Harper. I chose you. But I didn't choose to be like this." The tension between them had been building for months. Arguments had become part of their daily life. It didn't take much to ignite them. The sound of the alarm clock, a dish left in the sink, forgetting an important date. But deep down, Harper knew the fights weren't about those trivial things. They were about everything they hadn't said to each other. Then one day, Cole stopped trying. He stopped arguing, stopped slamming doors, stopped raising his voice. And in many ways, that hurt more than any argument had. Harper felt a tightness in her chest, the pain of knowing that it wasn't the absence of love that had pushed them apart. It was the sheer exhaustion of fighting for something neither of them was sure they could save. Now, Harper sat alone in the apartment that used to be theirs. Her eyes drifted to the envelope sitting on the kitchen table, the lawyer's name printed in stark, cold letters. Today, they were going to sign the papers, officially ending their 10-year marriage. The day had arrived at last. Had Cole by her side, and that made all the difference. The morning in the lawyer's office, Harper, with a heavy heart and a swirling mind, sat quietly. Cole, across from her, looked confused, hurt yet resigned. The lawyer, a man in his middle years with thin-rimmed glasses, read off the terms of the agreement in a monotone voice that felt distant, almost as if it was coming from another world. Harper gripped the pen so tightly her fingers ached. She flicked a glance at Cole. He was staring at her, his gaze so intense it sent a shiver down her spine. For a brief moment, she nearly faltered, almost told him everything, almost begged for help. But then she remembered the lonely nights, the unsaid words, the weight of everything they had both kept locked inside, and it hardened her resolve. That's when Cole said something that would change everything. "Stop, Harper, don't sign that." His voice was urgent but soft. "I know you're sick." The world seemed to halt. Harper felt as though all the air had vanished from the room. "How did he know? How could he possibly know? What did you say?" She managed to stammer, her voice trembling. Cole leaned in, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know you have cancer." The lawyer looked between them, clearly bewildered by the sudden shift in the conversation. Harper felt the color drain from her face. Her heart pounded wildly against her ribs. "You're imagining things," she whispered, avoiding his gaze, but deep down she knew it was futile. Cole had always been able to read her, even when she tried to hide her thoughts. "I'm not," he replied softly. "I found the test this morning when I went to get my things from the apartment." Earlier that day, Cole had gone to their old apartment to retrieve his belongings and finally move on. While going through a drawer, he had come across an envelope with the name of a medical clinic on it. Curiosity led him to open it, and inside, he found the test results: uterine cancer. The ground beneath him had seemed to vanish. He read the words over and over, trying to process what they meant. Harper was sick, and worse, she was facing it alone. In that moment, Cole realized that the real threat wasn't a divorce. It was the possibility of losing her forever. Something inside him shifted. He couldn't let her go through this alone, not after everything they had shared. Back in that cold room, Harper closed her eyes, the tears she had held back for so long finally spilling over. "You shouldn't have gone through my things," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You shouldn't have kept something like this from me." Cole's voice came out louder than intended, full of raw emotion. "My God, Harper, did you really think I would let you go through this on your own?" She didn't respond immediately. How could she explain the paralyzing fear that consumed her? How could she put into words the terror of becoming a burden, of watching love shift into something that felt like duty or obligation? "What do you want to say, Cole?" She finally spoke, her voice choked with emotion. "That I was scared? That I didn't want you to stay out of pity?" She had found out the diagnosis days before they were set to sign the divorce papers. She didn't have the courage to tell him. Their communication had broken down so completely. She was overwhelmed with conflicting feelings, and she never anticipated what would unfold next. Cole reached across the table, taking her hand in his. The touch felt so familiar, yet strangely distant after months of separation. It sent a shiver down her spine. "Do you want to know why our marriage came to this?" he asked softly. "Because we stopped fighting for each other. But I'm still here, Harper, and if there's one thing I've learned in this moment, it's that I don't want to lose you." His words hit Harper like crashing waves, sweeping away years of built-up hurt and resentment. As she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't in a long time. It wasn't just the quiet love that settles after years of being together. It was a passionate, intense love that faces every storm, no matter how fierce. "I'm not going anywhere," Cole said, squeezing her hand. The lawyer, realizing there was no divorce to finalize, cleared his throat discreetly. Harper and Cole, however, were lost in the moment. For them, there was no one else in the room. "But what if—" Harper began, her voice trembling. Cole interrupted her gently, placing his finger on her lips. "No, don't even think about it. We'll face this together, one day at a time." She nodded slowly, feeling the weight that had been pressing down on her for so long lift from her shoulders. It wouldn't be easy. She knew the road ahead would be difficult and filled with uncertainty, but now she had Cole by her side, and that made all the difference. The lawyer, realizing his work was done, quietly gathered the divorce papers and placed them in his briefcase. Harper and Cole remained seated, their hands intertwined, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Cole broke the silence. "Shall we go home?" he asked softly. Harper hesitated for a moment. Home. The word had taken on a new meaning. It was no longer just a place, but a feeling, safety, comfort, love. "Yes," she replied, a small smile forming. "Let's go home." They left the office hand in hand, leaving behind not just the divorce papers, but also years of misunderstandings and poor communication. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges and obstacles, but now they would face it together. In the weeks and months that followed, Harper and Cole rediscovered the love that had once brought them together. The medical appointments, the grueling treatments, the nights filled with fear and uncertainty, it all brought them closer in ways they never imagined. Cole was there through every step, holding her hand during chemotherapy, reading to her on nights when the pain kept her awake, constantly reminding her of her strength and beauty, even on the toughest days. In turn, Harper learned to appreciate life and love in a way she never had before. Every moment with Cole became more precious, every conversation more meaningful. They began to dream again, making plans for the future, no matter how uncertain it might be. Nearly 2 years after that fateful day in the lawyer's office, Harper received the news they had been waiting for: remission. The cancer had regressed. Though the road was still long, there was hope. That night, they celebrated with a simple dinner at home. Cole surprised Harper with a velvet box. "I know we're already married," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate diamond ring. "But I want to renew our vows. I want to promise you again, with even more certainty, that I'll be by your side, in sickness and in health, in good times and bad." Harper, tears welling in her eyes, could only nod. She was too emotional to speak. Cole slipped the ring onto her finger, sealing his promise with a gentle kiss. Months later, in an intimate ceremony in the garden of their home, the same garden where they had shared so many memories, Harper and Cole renewed their vows. Surrounded by friends and family, they promised eternal love once more. This time, the words in sickness and in health held a depth and meaning they could never have imagined years before. It wasn't just a phrase spoken during a ceremony. It was a promise lived, tested, and strengthened through adversity. As they exchanged rings and glances laden with emotion, Harper and Cole knew that real love wasn't about perfection or always having happy moments. It was about choosing to stay, even when leaving would have been easier. It was about finding beauty in difficult times, strength in vulnerability, and hope even on the darkest days. And with a kiss that sealed not just a new beginning, but also the journey that had brought them there, Harper and Cole embarked on the next phase of their lives. The future was still uncertain, as it always is, but now they knew with unshakable certainty that they would face every challenge together. Because in the end, it wasn't just the words spoken in the lawyer's office that had changed everything. It was the thousands of words, gestures, and moments they had shared since then. It was a love rediscovered, deepened, and strengthened. This, they knew, was stronger than any obstacle life could throw their way.